Hello, everyone. My name is Chris Bates, and I am a doctor in cybersecurity. And today we are joined by Rick Dudley and Keisha Crosby. And if you both wanted to go ahead and give a quick introduction, Keisha, if you want to go first, just because you're
Sure, sure. My name is Keisha Crosby, founder and CEO of TriGuard Risk Solutions, bachelor's in mathematics, master's in engineering, over 20 something years of cybersecurity and software security experience, as well as crypto.
that's amazing. Thank you.
Hmm.
And Rick,
Yeah, name's Rick Dudley. Primarily, I work as a mechanism designer in the blockchain space. Launched a network called Laconic, and I used to work as a systems administrator. And I have a lot of just sort of practical security experience from those two professions.
perfect. Thank you. So the topic of the discussion is cybersecurity in the Web3 age. So I guess we can just start by establishing what do you both think is the crossover and frameworks between where cybersecurity came from in computer science, or I guess where people in the cybersecurity field have foundational philosophies versus what's happening in Web3 and where those things cross over and where they conflict in your experience?
Yeah, I mean, I think that's a good question. I think a lot of Web3, obviously starting with Bitcoin, has a lot of fundamental computer science. Fundamental is, cryptography is a linchpin in that system. But cybersecurity best practices are not a part of that community, broadly speaking. So there's sort of an understanding of abstract mathematical cryptography, but there isn't really a deep appreciation for the day-to-day practical things that you need to do as a user who is placing, at times hundreds of millions of dollars onto a single private key material, right? I mean, people do not have plans. They do not know what to do. They do not have strategies. They have not thought through any of the practical work around how to secure that asset. And I've personally been in a situation where you do implement some practices, but crypto's a little different from enterprise in terms of how you can do key recovery, how you have trusted individuals. So you can be in a situation in crypto where I had a wallet that I had intended to only have, money I was willing to lose on it, and I secured it in that way. And then, something blew up in price, and all of a sudden now this wallet is extremely valuable, but I didn't have the policies in place to manage that particular wallet. So I had to I had cold storage wallets. I had all these things. So now I had to have a whole plan for, okay, how do I move something from hot storage to cold storage? Well, did I even securely generate that key in the first place? I wasn't intending to do that. And so it's these types of challenges where I think there's a huge gap.
Thanks. Keisha, does that mirror your experience, or do you have any additional perspectives on that?
I think Rick is correct, but I think the problem with cybersecurity that used to be called information assurance, that used to be called, information security, system security. I think the problem stems from everybody looking at a system approach as opposed to let's make sure the software is secure, because even today people are still, even with AI and any other new technology, we're building platforms, systems, and software on riddled systems or buggy software. And we're not going back to basics. Like, we need to secure the software in order to secure the assets. And even with crypto, with quantum, they've been able to break a lot of crypto, AES, 256 has been broken. So we need to start focusing on how we secure the software. If we can secure, it's like a brain. Your body has a brain. Your software is your brain. It operates everything. Unbeknownst to you, it's doing functions that you're not thinking about. And your system, your body, your skeletal system, your muscular system, and every part of your skin, all of that are systems that operate off of the brain. And so we just got to take it back to basics. Let's secure, get, policies, procedures, methods around securing software and then building out.
So I think you brought up some great points. I didn't mean to leave out my degree is actually focused on computer science, but it's in cybersecurity and information assurance. I always leave that part out because it's confusing. But one of the things that they've done in the field is separated them out. So I think what you're alluding to is there was an assumption that information assurance is uh, automatic under proper cybersecurity protocols, but we've learned that's not necessarily true. And so in computer science, they've split out information assurance versus cybersecurity. And one of the things that has emerged in that is people often think of cybersecurity as digital, but from the time I've entered, I have a bachelor's in psychology, a master's in telecommunications, and then another master's in cybersecurity. And one of the things that has emerged in probably at least the recent decade that wasn't, I believe Kevin Mitnick was when it really started to emerge that physical systems are just as important in terms of whether it's the HVAC or whether it's the power connection, now that we know that power hammer attacks exist, or whether it's the sound proofing, because now that we know that acoustic attacks exist. So there are all these things that we did not know before, where we thought if something was air gapped and if something was disconnected from the internet, where it was safe. Now we know that's not true. And further, we know the human is always the weakest link. So when we're talking about these systems, we're always talking about humans using these systems, even when we're talking about AI. So in that context, where does the user come in both of your perspectives? Because I have a lot of thoughts about users, but I want to hear where both of you see users coming in, because we're supposed to have cybersecurity for users, but in my experience, a lot of times users undermine all of the cybersecurity that's put in place. So are you both seeing similar things in your experience?
Well, I mean, users aren't different in this environment as opposed to any environment. Users are just users. They're users of information systems. They're users of end products. So they're reliant on, the product developers to tell them, hey, this is safe. And it's not, honestly, it's not. There's nothing 100% secure. And how do you protect the users? We got to have, better policies that protect the users, more insurance that protects, the users' use of a product. We have UL, users laboratory, which protects us from electronics. We have, little UL stickers on stuff that we buy or products, but we don't have anything related to software or systems that we use on a daily basis. And if we can try to start wanting to protect the consumer more, or wanting to give the consumer assurance and insurance, then I think we can move on to a better practice, or more, minimal residual risk is the goal. It should be the main focus. We can't have 100% risk-free products, but if we can give minimal residual risk onto the user, I think that'll be great.
Yeah, I agree with that. I think a lot of my work is very much advisory services to people. So I've advised executives at exchanges. I've advised project founders. I've advised all sorts of people throughout the space. And I think for me, in the Web3 space, there's definitely a huge cultural gap between where people are. I mean, these are oftentimes, young men under 30 making millions of dollars worth of assets, and they are not particularly technical in their backgrounds. I mean, you two are way more there's heads and shoulders, leaps and bounds, whole another planet of technical expertise, right? These are not even people with computer science degrees. They oftentimes don't really understand how a web browser works. They don't understand the security model of a web browser sandbox or any of these sorts of things. And yet, at the same time, they're trusting these systems to hold, tens of millions, hundreds of millions of dollars in some cases. And so, I think it's a huge issue in terms of education in Web3, and I don't really see a short path or a direct path towards addressing the issue. I feel as though there is a space to deploy products. There's a product like Casa. I mean, I can't really recommend like ledgers or Trezors anymore because there was a high schooler who as a hobby was cracking some of the hardware wallets. And it's like, yeah, sure. I mean, that you do expect that to be, frankly, you would hope that they would need a scanning microscope or something, right? Like, it's not so much like there's some, and I guess I am going to get a little technical here. You don't expect there to be some informational barrier to a high schooler. You expect it to be the equipment costs, right? You expect it to be that it costs, millions of dollars to actually scan the chips and break the security that way. Not that you can just sort of, you know, just hack the circuit or just like do a voltage attack and compromise the system. You would expect that it's a little more sophisticated attack than that, but we don't have those products, so it's sort of impossible to to advise people on what to do. The products just aren't available in large part.
So you brought up a framing that is important to establish accessibility, in that if something is turned into a product, then by proxy, it's automatically putting it out of reach of a certain class. And so if we have a system in which cybersecurity is behind a paywall, are we setting everyone up for failure by only giving access to the people that can pay for it?
Yes, right.
Yeah, I mean, I think the short answer to that is yes, and there's a longer answer around, in crypto, people talk about banking the unbanked and these sorts of narratives, and I want to be optimistic about those narratives, but that doesn't reflect. I mean, someone called me the other day. It was a woman in her 60s, and someone had tricked her into putting malware on her computer and all of this. And I don't think that all of the stars are aligned on this, right? I think that in terms of Web3, that, let's say it's even if you don't have $5,000 at risk, to be frank, like, no one's gonna help you, right? Even $5,000 isn't really enough. So when you're talking about the barrier, there's absolutely a barrier that's there, and requiring hardware and services and this stuff is a barrier, absolutely. But I think we have to be sort of more honest about the other barriers that are already there, which is like, you kind of already need to have, 10K is a lot of money for a lot of people, and you really need to have something like that at risk before anyone's even gonna pick up the phone. And even then, it's like, if you lose $9,000 from Coinbase isn't gonna bat an eye. They're not gonna pick up the phone. They're not gonna do anything for you.
So real quick, one of the things that I've learned in this is that in cyber crimes, unless there has been $20,000 worth of damages, the FBI just won't even commit any manpower to it or person power, because it's not worth their time. So this is where a lot of the crime, if it's not accumulated into an organized group, then it can go under the radar because they're not breaking these entrance barriers. So Keisha, is your experience in line with what Rick's just explained?
Yeah, Rick is 100% correct. And it's not only in the Web3, it's in everywhere. It's permeated across. The thing is that I actually have a niece, and she owns like one of those salon plaza, and they hacked into her stuff. And she went to the, local police and the FBI, and they couldn't help her. They was like, well, get a new Square system, do this. So it permeates everything. And there are no, going back to what I first said, there's no real consumer protections, business protections. If you're not a Fortune 100 company or a big pocket person, are they going to help you? So that's where we are.
So on that note, I know personally I saw this problem, and this is one of the focuses of the foundation that I started in terms of especially small businesses fall through these cracks. But individuals especially can get targeted in hacks. But between a corporation and an individual, they can fall through the gaps, and then the corporation doesn't take responsibility. So in that environment, how does Web3 make itself a prospect to people who are used to being burned and not having any recourse when one of the main tenets is effectively, if decentralization exists, then you don't need to trust anyone, or you don't need the government to get involved. So how is that supposed to be viable to people who live in the environment in which they're already taken advantage of on non-Web3 systems? Because I can come up with my own ideas, and sometimes I see different routes, and sometimes I don't see any routes. But it would be interesting to get your perspectives on, because in the sense of these are labeled trustless systems, but inevitably when there is an individual, that whether it's as a product or as a utility, they have to trust what they're using. So how do we take the person that exists in this environment and put them in the Web3 environment, or get them into the Web3 environment?
I mean, I think that's
Whoever, yeah, go ahead, Rick.
I think that's just a fundamental challenge in the space. Like I don't think there's I mean, again, I have my own theories and ideas as well, and happy to discuss those, but without getting into sort of the theoretical.
Well, please get into the theoretical.
Yeah.
That's where I know you've had a lot of experience in the application and in the practical. This is where I'm wondering what your theoretical frameworks look like, because we don't really get a chance to hear those from people like yourself very often.
Yeah. Okay. Yeah, sure. So I think that, well, I'm trying to think about where to start. So if you think about, well, I'll start with this sort of high level notion, right? Your phone is incredibly sophisticated as a piece of electronics. We really undervalue the sophistication of the average Android phone that's on sale today. A phone that can run Android 13 today is a very capable piece of electronics, just full stop. What you have in an enterprise environment, what you have in an industry is not dramatically better in terms of features and performance than a commodity smartphone that you can get today, in the $500, $250 range. And so what we've been looking at Laconic is how to leverage these, like, for example, you have a ARM trust zone on a phone, and you have other trusted execution environments on phones. Apple has theirs, and the different Android manufacturers have different different brands. Those things are made to have, it's kind of silly. They're there for DRM video. They're there for secure payments. How can we leverage that same technology to provide security to a user, again, at a $500, $250 price point, a user of crypto, right? The only way we're able to hit that price point, because these are very small projects, The only way we're able to hit that price point is by leveraging existing phone technology and maybe having someone flash the phone. Maybe we can go through the app store. Maybe they can sideload something, but that's obviously going to be less secure. So trying to do experiments on how to do that. And basically also telling people just, we're going to sell you a phone. Like, we're going to sell you the phone. You'll be able to do your own audits and attestations from the phone to ensure that it's secure, using Graphene OS or something like this to ensure that the phone's secure. But just use this phone purely for crypto. You buy it, buy it from the store and flash it yourself. We'll flash it for you and charge you a little premium on top. And I think that is a viable path towards having people all sort of do crypto on phones. But that's kind of the only path I really see. The enterprise solutions, the institutional solutions like Coinbase, institutional, and these sorts of things that are leveraging HSMs and more traditional enterprise security models are obviously frankly, not well suited to Coinbase's case. They have to do an enormous amount of customization to get that usable. And then it's certainly out of scope for the end user. And so I think my hope is that the secure elements that we have to facilitate payments on phones can be leveraged in the crypto context without too much friction from Apple and Google and what have you, who are gatekeepers. And one of the things I've been struggling with is Apple wants their 30%, and it's like, it's almost worth it, right? It's like you have to sort of figure out, like, that's hard to answer. And then obviously on Android, it's not that bad. So figuring out how are we going to address it? Are we really just going to pay the 30% to Apple every time, or are we going to side load it? How are we going to address that? Yeah.
Isha, is that well, let me reframe that too, because then with all that said, I've seen mobile money in Uganda and Kenya and Nigeria, and it seems to have a lot less friction than crypto. So if we're talking about people sending money or remittances versus people who are using cryptocurrency as an investment vehicle, are we conflating technology uses and making it less likely that the person who just needs to send money is actually going to get the proper technology? Because I hear multiple use cases when we're talking about cryptocurrency. And to me, the person who's trading on an exchange is not the same as a person who's sending currency. And so this is where, if it's going to be a 30% fee to Apple, should that person sending currency be paying the same fee as the person trading? And so this is where, should all of the use cases be falling under the same umbrella when we're trying to present this technology to regular people to use it? And
Yeah,
then
I would say
Adrian.
no. Yeah, hi Adrian. I would say absolutely not. Like, yeah, that's an interesting point. I because of how I work, I don't even think of these questions super often. I usually think about it from an application context, not so much a financial context. So like, imagine you had a crypto-enabled chat application or something like this. And so, yeah, when you're looking at it, and that's very, again, speculative, right? When you look at the real applications on the ground today, they're, like you said, they're payments, remittances, investment, quote unquote, speculation. So I think we do need to be very clear about crypto as a speculative investment, which I think investors distinguish, but lay people don't always distinguish. And I do not think it's well suited for simple remittances for a lot of different reasons. It's an option. It could be a tool in your toolbox, but it's not the first tool that one would go to in a remittance situation, in my opinion.
Keisha or Adrian, any thoughts?
No, I agree, and especially from a standpoint of I will say consumer confidence. So we need to think about it in the context of also, long term, what does it mean from a standpoint of people's confidence in cryptocurrency in general, right? Because I think that's something we're always fighting. Does that make sense to you?
Oh, absolutely. And that's definitely, we discussed trust versus trustless earlier, and I think confidence is another dynamic that is important to discuss, in that someone can trust something, but their confidence levels can vary. And over
That's right.
time, they can lose confidence in something, but still trust that it functions the same. And we could point at various things, but the easiest is uh, a bus, for example. If you're taking a bus
Yeah.
and the bus is late,
Yeah.
you're confident that the bus is going to come, but your confidence that it's going to be on time is it drifts every minute that the bus is late, and obviously it can't be on time once it's late. So this is,
Right.
again, if you're taking the bus in a city, you're gonna trust that it's gonna come eventually. And so this is looking at humans as part of the chain.
Yeah.
I've always thought it was important to bring in uh, understanding human psyche and social psychology, but how do we get these things to be understood as more important to executives and those that actually make the decisions, where maybe they're looking at the returns on investment and they're looking at the statistics, but you can't see the human side? How do we have to turn humans into numbers to get this across? What are the ways that you all have been successful in getting across the human side of this framework?
Yeah, I mean, look at a real time example, right? And I'm sorry, I'm jumping in the middle, and I probably got like 20 minutes on this call. I apologize. But think about like Delta, right? Right now, people's confidence in Delta, at least my confidence, right, as a consumer, coming out of that issue with CrowdStrike, right, and everything else, when they were blue screening out, right, and then they lost all of their ability to sort of manage their flight attendants, their crews, all of that stuff. They had to go back to paper on that. But right now, they still, a lot in my mind, they still have not recovered, right? They're still seeing delays. There's still major issues. And so my confidence in Delta as an airline, if I was booking an appointment that I definitely had to be on time and make it, that would not be my first choice, right? So it gives you a real-time example of how that example you made with the bus is absolutely on point, but it's a real life example right now that says, yeah, the plane will show up, but will it show up on time in order for me to make my my loved one's funeral, or to make this business trip and actually make the business appointment on time that has severe consequences on the viability of my business, right? Those are things that I think they're struggling with. And I think now as we look at crypto and sort of the confidence that others have in it, I think we always have to be thinking about the branding that way, and also communicating, and also making both consumers as well as, like you said, CEOs and folks that really are impacting the outside the ecosystem, right? Making sure that they are aware that there are consequences to everything that they do, large and small, both the little c as well as big C to the overall community.
And Adrian, real quick, yeah, can you give a quick history of what led you, what position gave you the knowledge to be able to speak so eloquently on the subject and so knowledgeably? What's your background?
I'm a recovering federal executive from government, right? Where I actually I was a CIO at 4 different agencies. So my last stint was the CIO at FEMA. Before that, I was the CIO at NASA Goddard Space Flight Center. Before that, I was the CIO of National Weather Service. Prior to that, then I ran cyber at the Department of Energy. I was the agency CISO. But I've always been in this whole thing of innovation and thinking about how like smart contracts and everything else could actually expedite the bureaucracy. And now I'm on the outside, right? Having the same conversation where I started my own company called the Chain Block Company, a blockchain reversed, right? But looking at logistics and supply chains and the viability of those. So that's where I come from. I also run a nonprofit, actually 2. I've also run a nonprofit called the Smart Tech Nexus Foundation, where we're looking at how I'm affiliated with a for-profit company called Systech. We're in 22 different states using that platform to deliver human services. But one of the things is looking at how now those same services, we could connect up actually government services with community-based services and do that in a very agile way. And blockchain is part of that conversation, but it's also just thinking about it from a standpoint of workforce innovation, where we could get young folks also engaged in this field, and in a place where they don't necessarily have to go to college, but they could actually obtain the skills necessary to get to self-sufficiency very quickly. But also, again, being aware that there are a lot of potholes that they can run into. But so really thinking about these technologies and how we can gain better access to at-risk and underserved communities from a standpoint of skilling up young people, so that they may not have to necessarily go through a traditional route like me. I have 4 degrees. I wouldn't necessarily advise somebody to do that again, right? I just wouldn't financially, right? And so, are there ways that we can get young folks engaged where they can actually make money, be employed, reduce the roles of those folks that are receiving public assistance, so on and so forth. And then the last entity I actually just started, which is called the HBCU ISAC. It's for looking at information sharing analysis center for actually HBCUs. So trying to get threat intelligence information out there to them in a proactive way, but also helping them as they react to a ransomware attack, and providing tools and capabilities to support that. So that's what I do on a day-to-day. Again, I apologize for not making the earlier calls, but that's sort of where I sit.
Thank you for that wonderful explanation. And I'm blessed to be on the call with Black excellence like this. And sometimes you're on a Zoom and you feel like you just get smarter by being on the call with people. So I thank you all three for sharing your knowledge with us. So we have 5 minutes left. Keisha, do you have any parting thoughts?
Well, I'll part with what I begin with. Being a system engineer, we need to go with a holistic approach to everything we do. Nothing changes, it just gets compound. And if we just start looking at it from the start, the software, and then go out, I think we can have a more secure, relatable environment that is consumer focused.
Rick, any parting thoughts?
Not particularly. It's been a pleasure to speak with you all, and definitely some interesting, insights, and yeah, it's been fun.
So, but we have a couple extra minutes. What do you all say to people who want to get into this but don't know where to start? And I know it's not going to be easy to, 30 seconds or a minute per person, please.
I'll start. I would say for me, I didn't really go to much school, relatively speaking. I was an enthusiast from a very young age, and I pursued it very seriously from a very young age. I did eventually get a degree, but in psychology, as like Chris. But by that time, I'd already been working as a systems administrator and already been deploying systems at that point. Mm-hmm. And so I think that it's, I guess that would be my advice to people, is that if you're committed and you're serious and you are searching for opportunities, you can find those opportunities any number of ways. You don't necessarily, I couldn't keep going to school. I had to leave. So I commend anyone who can make it through and get the education that way. There's just more than one way to skin a cat, I think, is what I would say. And definitely, regardless of if you have a degree or not, or if you're going to school or not, I think probably, I'm guessing from you folks, that you were also working in the industry while getting those degrees. And I think that that's a vital thing that people omit and don't really appreciate when you're talking to younger people and you're like, but what were your internships, or what was this, or what was that? Like, you have to be working in the industry while you're getting these important degrees at the same time.
Yeah, Chris, I want to emphasize exactly what you said. I can't agree more wholeheartedly. Again, you're talking to somebody with 4 degrees, and I would not tell somebody to take my path, right? I mean, if you just love school, great. But if you're trying to actually live and survive, nah, right? I mean, especially from a standpoint of indebtedness, right? The other thing is, you're right, there's a number of websites out there, different sources you can find. What we're attempting to do is actually stand up an immersed learning platform where we actually begin to make that information more accessible, and also serve it up in a different way where it's more consumable to the target audience that we're looking at. And our audience is all those opportunity youth we're talking about, 13 to 21 on the street, potentially don't have a job or are not in school, right? And so what I would say is, as a group, we need to begin to think about how do we, if we want to grow the industry, because we need them, right? It's not an option. We need those folks, right? Because if you're looking at it right now, even those folks that are going to college and universities and getting certificates, there's just not enough of them to compete on the world stage, right? So if we're talking about, and I'm just really focusing in my comments on the US, right? If we went to Africa, that may be a whole different dynamic. But I'm saying our young folks right now, we need to be able to scale that. And so we're looking at how do we potentially scale upskilling to those youth where it's incentivized from, if you're a high school dropout, where we have a real incentive strategy for incentivizing growth and accomplishment real time. And so we're in the middle of trying to develop that. But one of the things is, I think we also need to think about the fact, in my opinion, that academia is broken, and there's certain people that benefit from that, but there are a lot of folks that may not, right? And we really want to speak to those folks that are not benefiting from it today.
Isha, you got a minute?
So I do have thoughts on that. I do believe that, a degree is a level up. A degree is a way to get to generational wealth, even though I haven't seen anybody without being Black without degrees with generational wealth. And I could be corrected. But I do believe that there is a path for it. And that path is start somewhere. If you're on the job and you want to level up, look at programs in your local area. Like they have, I think it's Workforce Opportunity Initiative or something. It's WOIA. And then they'll help you get certifications while you're underemployed and unemployed. So use those things to level up. But don't, if a job offers you, if you take a job offers you the benefit of going to school, why not use that benefit? Why leave it on the table? And you don't have to get a technical degree. You can just start somewhere.
Yeah, no,
that's
Tisha, I
fantastic
agree.
information.
If it's offered, I agree. I'll just be frank with y'all, right? So I went to Tuskegee. So did other folks on the call, right? So I'm a Booker T kind of guy, right? I'm not a W. Du Bois guy, right? And what I see right now is many of those skills, whether it be construction, working with our hands, agriculture, we have sort of jettisoned some of those career paths, and other races, other groups have stepped in, and they've become multimillionaires. To think about the Hispanic population directly, right? And they have stepped into the fold and done a lot of the construction jobs that don't require a degree, but they've obtained skills, right? And so what I'm saying is that we need to just look hard at that from a standpoint of, where are we leading our young folks, and then how do we communicate sort of what self-sufficiency looks like. I'm not talking about, I think eventually they may need a degree, but they also may not, right? So it's a lot of different paths to get there. I don't think there's just one path. And what we ended up doing during my sort of era and those coming after is we said a degree is the only way or the best way, right? And I'm saying, I think today we've proven, even Silicon Valley is proving that, where you don't necessarily need a degree to actually just be proficient. It's all about skills. If you can demonstrate skill, you're good.
So
yeah, but
this is
Silicon Valley doesn't look like this call.
For sure. And this is a fantastic discussion because as a person who also has 4 degrees, I've come to the conclusion that making education about making money was probably a philosophical mistake, but that's an
right.
entirely different discussion where we would probably need another hour to discuss whether we should be getting an education to make money, or if making money is its own thing that doesn't need education to necessarily do it. But again, thank you all for this call, because we have a great different discussion to have next time. And I appreciate all of your knowledge from your respective fields and from your experience. So thank you all for your time.
No, appreciate it.
Thanks for your time.
Yes, thanks for having me. Bye-bye.
All right, take care.